Back in the 60s, Jean-Paul Belmondo got together with the French director Philippe De Broca and said, hey, how about we make a movie where I can do my best impression of the Roadrunner? And maybe a couple of decades from now, another Hollywood star can take a look at this and decide, I can run in movies too. And Philippe De Broca said, why not? And so we get That Man in Rio. Made in 1964, the film stars Jean-Paul Belmondo and Francois Delacour. I hope that's how it's pronounced. And directed by Philippe De Broca. The film is an action comedy. So when the movie starts, we have Jean-Paul Belmondo who is playing Adrian, who's an airman, and he has come back to Paris on a 1 week leave. And all he wants to do is spend time with his girlfriend Agnès, played by Francoise Delacour.
Allez, à dans 8 jours.
Eh ben nous voilà rendus. Alors 8 jours du Fourquet.
Allez, salut le bel.
At the same time, someone breaks into the Paris Museum and steals a very old Amazonian statue. So when the police show up, they bring in one of the professors who works there, and the professor explains that a long time back, he and his friend went on an expedition to Brazil, which was sponsored by a French businessman.
Je vais vous montrer. Cette photo a été prise il y a 3 ans, au retour de notre expédition.
And they went into the Amazon and they found these 3 statues. And one of them was with the professor, which he kept in the museum, the one that just got stolen. The other one was with his friend. His friend is now passed away, but before he died, he hid the statue somewhere. So no one knows where that statue is, except for his daughter. And the last statue is with the French businessman who sponsored the entire expedition, and he now lives in Brazil. So having said that, the minute the professor leaves the museum, he gets kidnapped. In the meantime, Adrian reaches to Agnès' place. So it turns out that Agnès is the daughter of the professor's friend, the man who died. And when Adrian reaches there, the police is already there and the police are questioning Agnès. And then Agnès steps out for like something and she also gets kidnapped. So Adrian immediately jumps out of the balcony. They're on the first floor, so you don't need to worry. And he gets on a bike and starts chasing them. And then the rest of the movie is Adrian trying to rescue his girlfriend, and his girlfriend wants to recover the statues and figure out what the mystery is, and then who's the villain and why do the villains want the statue. And Adrian panicking the whole time because he's on a 8-day leave and he's now in Rio trying to rescue Agnès. And if he doesn't get back in time, he's going to get court-martialed and shot.
Auriez-vous l'amabilité de m'arrêter? Motif? Je suis déserteur. J'ai perdu mon uniforme. J'ai voyagé sans billet. J'ai escroqué un infirme. J'ai assommé des blancs, des noirs, des collègues à vous de toutes les couleurs. Je roule dans une voiture volée.
Now, if the plot of this movie sounds a little bit like an adventure of Tintin, because you have like these 3 statues and they might point to like a hidden treasure or something, you're right, because both the writer and the director were big fans of Tintin, and they wanted to adapt like some storylines or plot points from the Tintin comics and also some of the action scenes from the Tintin comics. Now, if this also sounds a bit like Indiana Jones, that is also true because firstly, Steven Spielberg is a big fan of Tintin. I mean, he made one of the Tintin movies. The other one was supposed to be made by Peter Jackson, but I'm guessing that's not happening. And before making Indiana Jones, he also watched That Man in Rio something like 8 or 9 times. Like, this is from Wikipedia, but it makes sense because there are things here that feel similar to some of the stuff that you see in Indiana Jones. Now, the movie overall is a lot of fun. Like, there are a ton of positives. Like, firstly, John Paul Belmondo and Francois Delacour are both absolutely fantastic. Like, John Paul Belmondo has like an effortless charm to him. He has great comic timing. They both have great comic timing. So, in like action scenes, they both are fantastic. Now, even though the plot is very thin, the movie is mostly propped up by like a ton of really funny action scenes that are fairly long and happen very frequently, so you're never really bored. The movie is also shot really well. Like, some of the environments are pretty interesting to see. Like, when they get to Brazil, like after they leave Rio, they travel a little more inwards and they end up in this place which is mostly just like, I think they just, I mean, that's what was probably going on in Brazil at the time. Like, a ton of like industrialization and development was going on, so there were just like these massive areas which have been completely deforested and it looks barren, but there are like buildings coming up everywhere, so it looks very strange because it's very empty. Which also brings me to like the action scenes that are being done in the movie. So Belmondo is like certifiably insane because like the amount of stuff that he does in this movie, and you can see like there are points where he's actually in danger. Like in the beginning when Agnes gets kidnapped and he gets on a bike and immediately starts chasing after her, you see this one point where he's like really close to the car where Agnes is, and I think the car sort of accidentally gets too close to his bike and his bike goes out of balance and the scene cuts, but I'm pretty sure he fell down at that point in time. And then you have like scenes where he's flying a plane or like he's in a plane, and then you have points where he's like outside windows on like the fourth or fifth floor of a building. And I'm looking at all this and going like, how is this man still alive? Well, he's not alive anymore. He died at the age of 81, but yeah, he survived like a ton of really insane stunts that he was doing back in the 60s. And talking about stunts and cinematography, there's this one scene which is very interesting to watch. Not only because like he runs around a lot in that, so it reminds me a lot of like Tom Cruise running in movies, but also because the cinematography and the time is so weird. Because so Agnes gets kidnapped like a second time, and like there's a party going on the roof of this building, and he sees Agnes getting kidnapped, and the party is happening at night. And by the time Belmondo gets down to the ground floor of the building, it's already like dawn. And then he starts running after them, and it's already like, 7 or 8 in the morning. So it just, you get like this really fast, night to day cycle happening in the middle of a run, which is pretty strange. But also like visually, it's very, very weird to watch because there's no one there. Like he runs through this entire place and like through the road onto another place, and it's just completely empty. Also, one of the great things about the movie is that it's really sort of small scale in terms of the cast. Like there are only like, there's him, there's Francois Delacour, there's the professor, the rich businessman, and the 2 henchmen who are like trying to steal the statues. So it's like a total of 6 people. Like that's it. Okay? And also like the ending is really small scale, which helps out a lot because it's just Belmondo fighting the 2 henchmen. And the other great thing about the ending is that this is probably the most sort of realistic but also the oddest way in which the villain dies. So I won't spoil it, but if you ever get around to watching the movie, the way the villain dies, it sort of makes you feel like, yeah, that could actually happen. It makes a lot of sense. But also it's like the oddest way to end like a treasure hunt movie. But overall, the movie is a lot of fun. Like, not only did it get nominated for Best Original Screenplay that year, it also made a ton of money at the box office. It actually did so well that Jean-Paul Belmondo and Philippe De Broca got together and they said, we should do this again. And they did it again the very next year, and they made Up to His Ears. So Up to His Ears is based on a Jules Verne novel called The Tribulations of a Chinaman in China. The plot is actually quite interesting. It's actually a much more involved plot than what you get in That Man in Rio. So the story revolves around this rich businessman played by Belmondo by the name of Arthur. And Arthur is like a billionaire and he's super depressed and really sad because he has so much money that there's nothing exciting to do. Sadly, he doesn't have a social media company that he can buy to entertain himself. So instead, he decides he's just going to kill himself. So the movie starts off and he takes his car and he goes down a hill and then drives it off a cliff. And the car immediately explodes as it used to in older movies. And then his people show up, like there's his butler and his fiance's mother and her mother's friend, and a Chinese gentleman by the name of Mr. Go, who is his advisor.
Hey! Monsieur! Il a dû se faire très mal!
And they kind of go like, oh my god, he's dead. But he's not dead, he's hanging off a tree. Somehow he managed to survive. So they pull him up and they get him back to his boat. He's off on a world tour because he's that depressed. And they're sort of coming close to Hong Kong. So they sort of dock in Hong Kong.
Quelle couleur, quel exotisme!
Arthur, on va faire un tour à terre.
Non!
And it turns out this is like his 9th suicide attempt in 1 week. And his fiance's mother is sort of really angry about it because like, at least marry my daughter first. So if you die, she'll get your money. But he's too bored to even get married. And then his accountant shows up and he's like, oh, we invested your money in the wrong thing and the stock market crashed. So now you're broke. And then he gets even more depressed. So he said, okay, screw this. Like I was bored and depressed when I had money. Now I have no money. So I'm just going to hang myself.
Alors tu recommences. Tu continues.
Je veux mourir.
And then, Mr. Go shows up and he's like, no, wait. If you're going to, like, you want excitement in life, but if you're going to kill yourself, then you might as well take care of the people that you're leaving behind, like, namely your fiance and me, because you really like me. So he says, let's go to an insurance company and we'll take out an insurance. So they take out like a $2 million insurance for a month because he's like, I'm going to die anyways. And it's like, if the insurance will get paid out, like 50% goes to Mr. Go and 50% to his fiance. But there's only one rule in the insurance document, which is the money won't be paid out if you commit suicide. So now Belmondo is like, now what do I do? So Mr. Go is like, don't worry, I'll just hire some people to kill you. You won't find out.
Si je comprends bien, j'ai plus le droit de me suicider.
Non, mais rassure-toi, tu veux mourir, je vais t'aider.
Comment tu ferais ça? Tu me tuerais?
J'agirai comme un père.
Okay, but like now you have a month to live, so go, do something exciting. But now Arthur is like in full panic mode because wherever he sees like assassins or like would-be assassins. So he's like completely panicking. And you get this fantastic little action scene where like he jumps off a boat and hangs onto a crane, and there's this funny thing where he's wearing this white suit and he goes through like a chimney or like this chimney of a ship, and he goes through the black smoke and his suit turns black, and then he falls down and ends up in like a flour mill, and then flour falls on him and his suit turns back to white again. It's done really nicely. And so now he's like panicking and running everywhere, and he ends up at this nightclub and he meets Adrian, played by Ursula Andress, and she's a dancer over there, and he immediately falls in love.
Mais
Mais pas d'affolement. Voilà 3 mois que je viens vous applaudir, mais je n'ai jamais osé vous aborder.
3 mois.
Oui.
Je ne suis là que depuis 8 jours.
And so now he doesn't want to die anymore because he's like, oh, I just fell in love. But Mr. Go has gone missing. So someone says like, oh, Mr. Go has gone off to Nepal. Then the rest of the movie is him trying to track down Mr. Go and, you know, try to get the assassins off him. But did Mr. Go hire the assassins or did someone else hire the assassins? You know, like that's also a mystery. So overall, this movie is more fun for me than That Man in Rio. I think firstly because the plot is better, or you know, there are like more things happening in the plot. I think because it's based on an actual novel, there is like it has more depth to it. Secondly, like visually, it's a lot more interesting because most of it takes place in Hong Kong, but there's also a point where they go to India, so it was fun to see India in like a French movie, India from the 60s, and it's shot really well. So I got to see like they go to like Red Fort and Jama Masjid, and they go to Jantar Mantar.
This is an astronomic observatory, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, built in 20th century Fox. Yes, si se scala subilando al cielo, solo informai sabir, yes. Para relugar toute la volta celestina.
Que dit-il?
C'est un observatoire astronomique, monsieur. En 1750, ces messieurs avaient déjà calculé la distance qui nous sépare du Soleil.
So it was a lot of fun to see India, and then they go to Nepal. But yeah, like visually, it's a lot more sort of dense because like a lot of stuff that happens in That Man in Rio is like very empty. You know, it almost just feels like Brazil is empty. Here, because they're doing everything in Hong Kong, Hong Kong is like densely packed. So there are like people everywhere, lots of stuff happening all the time. So it feels much more sort of like rich in that sense. Also, like there are scenes in this which I think are a lot more funnier than anything I got in That Man in Rio. Like this is one scene where he's in disguise. I'll try not to spoil it. But that shot is done really well. Like when he finds out like, oh, now there are actual assassins after me. And he tries to go into disguise and he's like running around. And there are like posters of him printed everywhere and put up on every wall. Like that scene is done extremely well. The only problem I have with the film is that the last 10 or 15 minutes of the film is just sheer insanity. It's like Philippe De Broca just went like, you know what, just do everything. So it's like an all-out war breaks out in Hong Kong. You know, like by the end of it, like he comes out of a prison and there are like these 200 gangsters that attack him, and then they end up in a bunker and they're like shooting with machine guns and there are like bombs going off. And then they're on a boat, and then they're on a beach, and then it suddenly turns into like a beach romance for like 5 minutes, and then they're in a forest, and there are elephants, and then there is a fight taking place on a plane. It's just like, you know, going like, what the, like, just calm down a bit. This is just like insane. But like the plane sequence is genuinely crazy because there's a point where they're like jumping off from one plane to another, and this is from like 65, so it's definitely like, and it doesn't look like it's being done on set. It's not like they've hung two planes in front of like a sky background or something. It's like actual planes in the sky. It feels really crazy. Like I would like to know how they even pulled that off. But yeah, like beyond that, I think up until that point, like up until the final 10 minutes of the movie, it's extremely well done. Like it moves at a great pace. It's a lot funnier than That Man in Rio. It just, the last 10 minutes just completely falls apart. Where it doesn't like, it doesn't fall apart. It just goes like so much that you're like, okay, we need to end this now. And so it does, you know, the nice thing is it ends on a pretty good note. So, you know, that's a good thing. But overall, both films are great to watch. Like both films have great action sequences. Belmondo is really charming and funny. And both films are directed and shot really well. So if you have, you know, so if you're looking for things to watch, I'd definitely recommend That Man in Rio and Up to His Ears.